There is a powerful truth that most people learn the hard way. When you're always available, you become invisible. The more you show up for someone who isn't appreciating you, the more they come to expect it. Over time, your love, your energy, your presence, it stops being something they notice and starts being something they assume. It's not malice on their part, it's just human psychology. We adjust to what's constant. But there's a tipping point, a moment when what once thrilled them now bores them, simply because it's always there. So instead of chasing validation through constant proximity, pull back, create space, give them the silence loud enough to hear their own neglect. Let your absence disrupt the comfort they've mistaken for entitlement. Too many people fear that stepping back means losing someone. But the truth is, if someone disappears because you stop overextending, they were never really there to begin with. Presence is powerful, but only when it's respected. If you stay hoping they'll one day wake up and see your worth, you're waiting for a moment that may never come. That moment only arrives when their world feels your absence, not your persistence. You are not showing love by remaining in a space where you're undervalued. You're teaching them that you require nothing in return. And that's not love, it's self-abandonment. Let them feel what it's like when you're no longer the one filling every gap, answering every message, carrying the emotional load. That's the moment real recognition begins. In every dynamic, there's an unspoken negotiation happening. When you show up with everything and they show up with the bare minimum, a pattern is formed. And unless it's interrupted, it becomes permanent. The pattern becomes the relationship. So how do you interrupt it? You step away, not to manipulate, but to recalibrate. You stop proving yourself and start protecting yourself. You shift the energy from giving to grounding. When someone is used to your love being a given, your withdrawal becomes a mirror. They suddenly see what they've been blind to, that your presence was never owed. It was a gift, and if they don't value it, they lose it. Absence forces reflection. It creates the contrast people need in order to realize what they had. We only appreciate warmth when we feel the cold. We only value light when we've known darkness. And people only value your energy when it's no longer cushioning their every need. You're not being cruel by stepping back. You're being clear. You're setting a standard that says, I'm not staying where I'm overlooked. That's not drama. That's dignity. You deserve a connection where you're not constantly proving your value to someone who should already see it. Your job is not to convince them, is to protect your peace. If they wake up, great. If not, you haven't lost anything. They have. One of the most empowering things you can do in any relationship is to become comfortable with being missed. That means detaching from the need to always fix, always explain, always be there. Let people sit with the version of you that says, I won't chase you to remind you I matter. This isn't about ego. It's about energy. Your time, your presence, your care, those are not unlimited resources. And the more you pour them into someone who treats them as a default, the more you drain yourself. When you take that energy back, you're not punishing them, you're prioritizing you. And in that process, they learn the cost of what they took for granted. When you disappear from someone's life, not in anger, but in grace, it sends a ripple. They feel the shift. They notice the silence. They may not admit it at first, but something changes. The convenience of having you around is gone, and they're left wondering, where did that comfort go? That's when the reevaluation begins. You no longer being there to answer every call, support every crisis, or soothe every mood forces them to confront their role in the dynamic, maybe for the first time. That's when they have to ask themselves, was I giving back? Or was I just taking? It's important to understand that love without boundaries becomes obligation. And obligation breeds resentment. You begin to feel bitter, exhausted, and unseen. Not because you gave too much, but because you gave to someone who wasn't giving back. That bitterness is your soul's alarm clock. It's waking you up to the imbalance. It's saying, step back, reclaim your space. When you do that, you're not being selfish. You're being wise. You're letting your distance speak where your words have failed. You're letting action do what please could not. That kind of silence echoes louder than any confrontation ever could. So many people are afraid that pulling away will push the other person further, but ask yourself, further from what? From a dynamic where you're underappreciated? From a cycle where they give little and receive a lot? That's not a loss, it's a liberation. What you're doing is changing the terms. You're saying, if you want access to me, it has to come with effort. You're removing the all-you-can-eat buffet of your love and replacing it with a seat at the table that has expectations. The ones who are meant for you will understand that. They'll show up or they'll show themselves out. Either way, clarity wins. You don't teach someone your value by over-explaining it. You teach them by embodying it. You lead by example. When you respect yourself enough to walk away from treatment that falls short, you model what self-worth looks like. People may not like it at first. They may call you distant, difficult, or dramatic. But that's only because they were benefiting from your lack of boundaries. Once those boundaries are set, the dynamic resets or dissolves. Either way, it no longer costs you your dignity. And that is always worth the shift. Your absence becomes the moment they remember your presence. Not as a convenience, but as a blessing. Ultimately, this is not about getting someone back. It's about getting you back. When you're constantly present for someone who doesn't see you, you slowly disappear from yourself. Your dreams shrink, your confidence fades, your identity becomes wrapped in someone else's attention or lack of it. Reclaiming your space means reclaiming your power. It's not about abandonment, it's about alignment. You don't need to disappear to hurt them. You need to step back to heal you. And in that space, you rediscover the truth that you were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. There's a harsh reality many people ignore in the name of love. Effort is the proof of interest. You cannot keep excusing someone's minimal investment just because you feel a deep connection. Feelings don't build relationships, actions do. When someone consistently shows up halfway and you respond by showing up all the way, you're not creating love, you're creating imbalance. You're teaching them that you'll carry the weight no matter how little they contribute. And the longer that goes on, the more they learn they don't have to try. You become the one who plans, fixes, gives, and nurtures while they simply exist. That's not a relationship. That's emotional labor disguised as romance. And it never ends well. Love that is not matched with effort is not love. It's comfort. It's someone staying close to the warmth of your care without ever stepping into the fire of commitment. They take the affection, the time, the consistency, and give just enough to keep you hopeful. But hope without change is just self-deception. Every time you accept crumbs, you're reinforcing the belief that crumbs are enough. You are not teaching them how to love you. You're showing them that you'll love them regardless of how they show up. That's not noble. That's dangerous. It trains someone to believe that your value comes without any price. And people don't cherish what they don't pay for. You don't get what you deserve, you get what you require. And when you require nothing, that's exactly what you'll be given in return. We often think love should be unconditional. And yes, love can be. But access should be earned. Access to your energy, your time, your loyalty. That's not a free-for-all. If someone wants your world, they have to bring something to it. Not just promises, but real, measurable effort. But when you keep rewarding them for doing less, you rob them of the chance to rise. Growth doesn't come from comfort. It comes from being challenged. And your standards are the challenge that shows them you're not afraid to walk away. Some people say, but I don't want to play games. And that's fair. You shouldn't have to manipulate to be loved. But there's a difference between playing games and having standards. When you allow someone to continuously show up with low energy, low consistency, and low respect, and you keep giving them your highest self, you're not avoiding games. You're betting on potential instead of reality. And in that gamble, you lose time, self-worth, and peace. Love should be reciprocal. Not perfectly balanced every day, but consistently mutual. If the effort isn't mutual, then what you have isn't love. It's convenience dressed up as connection. There comes a point when you have to ask yourself, am I loving them or am I rescuing them? Are you constantly being the understanding one, the forgiving one, the fixer? If your love looks more like emotional babysitting than a partnership, you're not in love. You're in a cycle of proving, pleading, and performing. That isn't love. That's a trap. And the only way to break it is to stop showing up for someone who doesn't meet you where you are. You have to stop giving them what they haven't earned. Because when you do, you teach them something powerful, that your love is not endless and your patience is not unconditional. You are not hard to love. You are just loving people who don't want to try. You're handing your heart to someone who prefers ease over effort. And they'll never tell you to stop because they enjoy the benefits, but deep down, they don't respect what they never had to work for. That's why you must learn to hold back what they haven't earned, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Stop making it easy for someone to treat you like an option while you treat them like a priority. Love isn't about overgiving, it's about mutual giving. And you can't get mutual if you're doing both sides of the equation alone. You can tell how much someone values you by what they're willing to sacrifice for you. Not just in grand gestures, but in consistency, in communication, in compromise. If you're always the one reaching out, always the one initiating, always the one making peace, then ask yourself, what happens if you stop? What happens if you pause the effort? If they disappear, the answer is clear. Your presence was feeding the connection. They were just riding the wave. It hurts, yes, but it also sets you free. Because now you're no longer confused. You're no longer carrying a love that wasn't real. You're facing the truth, and that truth will save you. Effort is the currency of respect. And respect is what holds love together when emotions fade and life gets hard. Anyone can show love when it's convenient, but it takes real intention to show up again and again. Especially when the initial excitement wears off. If they're not doing that, then they're not loving you, they're enjoying you. And there's a massive difference between being loved and being used as a source of emotional comfort. You deserve more than just someone who likes the way you make them feel. You deserve someone who chooses you daily, who invests, who builds. And that only starts when you stop accepting lazy love. The moment you stop rewarding low effort is the moment you make space for high effort love to enter. But as long as you're filling that space with someone who does the bare minimum, there's no room for more. You're busy nurturing someone who should be growing on their own. And that becomes a full-time job with no benefits. So release it. Create the gap. Let the wrong person fall away so the right one can find you. It's not your job to drag someone into maturity. It's your job to be the kind of person who inspires it by refusing to settle for anything less than what you give. You are worthy of a love that doesn't make you question your worth. But to receive that, you have to act like it. Stop handing your heart to people who haven't earned your trust. Stop ignoring red flags just to feel chosen. Stop doing the work of two people just to keep something alive that should have ended months ago. You can't beg someone into loving you right. You can't fix laziness with loyalty. What you can do is walk away, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Because the moment you do, you stop rewarding lazy love and start attracting the kind of love that actually shows up. There's a big difference between pushing people away and standing firm in what you know you deserve. So many of us lower our standards out of fear of being alone, fear of being too much, fear that if we ask for what we really want, we'll scare someone off. But here's the truth. If someone walks away because you have standards, they were never going to meet you where you needed to be anyway. Standards aren't barriers, they're boundaries. They don't repel the right person, they repel the wrong one. When you stand in your worth, it doesn't block love, it filters it. It ensures that what gets through is aligned, mature, and ready. The people meant for you won't be intimidated by your expectations. They'll be inspired by them. You don't owe anyone access just because they like you. Attraction is not enough. Chemistry is not enough. These things are starters, not sustenance. Standards are what separate flings from foundations. They clarify the difference between someone who's just passing time and someone who's ready to build something real. A person who genuinely wants to be with you won't flinch at your standards. They'll appreciate them because your standards reflect how deeply you've come to know yourself. You're not demanding perfection. You're requiring alignment. And only those who are serious, intentional, and capable will stay long enough to meet you there. Sometimes people mistake confidence for coldness. They assume that because you won't settle, you must be guarded. But confidence in love is not about being unapproachable. It's about being unavailable to those who don't bring the same depth, effort, and consistency. When you operate from self-worth, you don't chase, you attract. You don't audition, you observe. You watch how someone shows up when there's no reward yet. You notice how they handle discomfort, how they respond to your boundaries, how they treat you when you stop bending. That's when you see who's genuine, because real ones don't run from your standards, they rise to meet them. People often say, what if my standards are too high? But what they're really asking is, what if I ask for more and don't get it? That fear of lack makes us compromise. It makes us shrink. But high standards are only a problem to those who have low effort. A person of character won't be scared off by your clarity. They'll feel safe in it. Your standards won't limit your options. They'll eliminate distractions. And that's a gift, because for every person you filter out, you save yourself time, heartbreak, and energy. You don't need 10 options, you need one real one. And your standards are how you find them. There's a narrative that says if you're too picky, you'll end up alone. But there's something far worse than being alone. Being with someone who drains you, confuses you, or makes you question your value. Loneliness isn't cured by companionship, it's cured by connection. And connection doesn't grow in shallow soil. It grows in depth, in honesty, in shared values. You can't find that by settling for almosts and maybes. You find that by saying no to what doesn't feel right, even when it's tempting. You find it by holding space for what you actually want, even if it takes time. Standards are the sieve through which real love is refined. It's easy to confuse someone's excitement for commitment. They say the right things, they show up at first. But when your standards kick in, when you start requiring emotional presence, consistency, and accountability, that's when the real test begins. Because anyone can love the version of you that asks for nothing. It's the one who says, here's what I need to feel safe, loved, and respected, that separates the players from the partners. If they ghost, withdraw, or guilt trip you for having those needs, they're not your person. Let them go. Their exit is not rejection, it's redirection. And every no clears the path for someone who's a yes. We live in a culture that praises flexibility, but when it comes to relationships, flexibility without standards becomes self-betrayal. You start to excuse bad behavior. You make room for inconsistency. You convince yourself that being easygoing will make you easier to love, but love built on your silence isn't love, it's survival. The more you bend, the more you blur. Until one day you don't recognize yourself in the relationship. You've tolerated so much that your standards feel foreign. Don't let that happen. Protect your non-negotiables. Be kind, yes, but be clear, because clarity is not cruelty, it's kindness to yourself. It's not your job to make people comfortable at the expense of your standards. It's not your role to explain over and over why your needs matter. The right person won't need convincing. They'll see you, hear you, and want to meet you there. Not because you pressured them, but because they value you. And if someone isn't ready for that level of accountability, let them disqualify themselves. Don't lower the bar just to keep them close. Love that requires you to become less of yourself is not love. It's compromise disguised as connection. And over time, that kind of love turns into resentment. Choose differently. You are not difficult because you want consistency. You are not too much because you want emotional maturity. You are not high maintenance because you want reciprocity. These are not flaws. These are foundations. And if someone labels your standards as too high, ask yourself, too high for whom? For someone who doesn't want to grow? For someone who hopes you'll settle so they don't have to step up? That's not your problem. That's their limitation. And your standards are not responsible for their refusal to evolve. Keep them high, not to punish others, but to protect yourself from being pulled into another cycle of almosts and not quites. The strongest people are not the ones who never get lonely. They're the ones who refuse to lower their standards just to fill a temporary void. They understand that real love takes time. It requires patience, discernment, and the willingness to be misunderstood by those who want access without accountability. The standards will intimidate the wrong people, and that's exactly the point. Because the right person will see them not as a challenge, but as an invitation to bring their best, to show up fully, to build something real. And when that happens, you'll realize your standards weren't obstacles. They were the exact reason the right one found you. Sometimes the most powerful message you can send is silence. Not the cold, bitter kind that punishes, but the strong, calm kind that says, I've done my part. When someone begins to take you for granted, words often lose their impact. They've heard the speeches, they've seen the tears, they've felt the frustration, and still they've changed nothing. That's when your presence becomes too available, too constant, too expected. And in that comfort, they forget your value. So instead of another conversation, you offer space, not as a game, but as a boundary, because absence speaks in ways that presence never could. When you remove yourself from a situation where you're being overlooked, you're not being dramatic, you're being deliberate. You're choosing to stop feeding a dynamic where you're the one always showing up, explaining, proving, fixing. People often confuse access with permanence. They assume because you've always been there, you always will be. But nothing awakens a person's awareness like your absence. Suddenly, the things they ignored start to echo. The energy you brought, the stability you offered, the comfort of your presence. It all becomes unmistakable once it's gone. Sometimes distance isn't about teaching them a lesson, it's about reminding them of the cost of losing you. Absence has a way of clearing the fog. When you're constantly available, people stop checking in with how they feel about you. They rely on your consistency, not their own effort. But once you step back, it creates a gap they have to cross on their own. That's when you find out who's willing to reach for you. If someone really values you, they will notice your silence, not just hear it, but feel it. And more importantly, they'll respond to it with maturity, not manipulation. The right ones won't panic and blame. You'll see them show up differently. And if they don't, that's your clarity, not your loss. People can't miss what never leaves. If you're always there, always fixing, always softening the consequences of their behavior, then they have no reason to change. Sometimes love requires you to stop buffering people from the effects of their own actions. Let them sit in the discomfort of your distance. Let them feel the reality of what happens when your warmth, effort, and time are no longer on tap. It's not about punishing, it's about aligning. You're not withholding love. You're removing yourself from a space where love isn't being nurtured. And in that space, the truth always rises to the surface. Taking a step back doesn't make you cold. It makes you conscious. You start to see things more clearly. You notice the imbalances you overlooked, the chasing you normalized, the energy you gave without receiving. And as the emotional noise quiets, your intuition gets louder. That stillness reveals what your attachment tried to hide. You were holding on out of habit, not harmony. And once you stop showing up on autopilot, the reality of the relationship begins to speak for itself. Absence doesn't just teach them, it teaches you. It brings your attention back to where it belongs, on your peace, your standards, and your self-respect. Letting someone feel your absence is one of the greatest acts of self-worth. You're telling the world, I will not overextend myself to be seen. You're showing that your time and heart are not infinite resources for someone to casually consume. You're breaking the cycle of one-sided investment and creating space for reciprocity or release. The people who care will lean in. The ones who are just taking will fall away. And that's not abandonment, it's alignment. You don't have to explain your boundaries to be respected. Sometimes you just have to enforce them. And distance is one of the clearest boundaries there is. When you stop calling, texting, checking in, the silence can be deafening for both of you. And that's the point. It forces reflection. If they really valued the connection, they'll feel the imbalance and they'll want to fix it. But if they were simply enjoying the benefits without contribution, they'll quietly disappear. That's the beauty of space. It's an emotional sorting system. It reveals who's real and who was just comfortable. You don't have to argue, beg, or convince anymore. You just create the space and let their response tell you everything you need to know. Absence filters the noise and magnifies the truth. We are taught to fix things fast, to rush in, to make peace, to rescue the moment. But healing doesn't happen in chaos. It happens in space. And sometimes the person who needs to sit in that space is not just them, it's you. You need to remember what it feels like not to be chasing someone who keeps running. You need to remember your own company, your own strength, your own voice. Because when you reconnect with yourself, your tolerance for being taken for granted disappears. You stop needing someone to choose you because you've already chosen yourself. And that energy is unshakable. If someone doesn't notice your absence, or worse, does notice it and still does nothing, that's a powerful answer. It doesn't mean you weren't enough. It means they weren't ready to grow, to reciprocate, to build. Don't internalize that as failure. Let it liberate you. Because the longer you stay where you're undervalued, the more you begin to forget your own worth. You begin to question your standards, doubt your needs, and silence your voice. That's why stepping away isn't just a strategy. It's survival. Your peace is not negotiable, and distance is often the only way to protect it. Eventually, the ones who truly care will come back, not just with words, but with changed behavior. They'll have felt the absence, understood the cost, and decided to show up differently. But not all will return, and that's a blessing too. Because love that only exists when it's convenient isn't love. It's habit. And habit should never be confused with connection. When you let the absence do the teaching, you stop holding emotional lectures to an empty classroom. You allow time, space, and silence to show you what words never could. And in that clarity you rise, not bitter, but better.